This is a presentation about, and it's actually an interactive discussion, a cross-functional interactive discussion. It's designed for people who are uh, both in the business side as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches and business clients, and also for people who are architects and engineers, and all of those disciplines are represented in this group. So this is designed to be cross-functional. We've got other presentations that are specifically technical or that are specifically non-technical. And so this is a space between those two extremes. And the idea is to get the technical and non-technical people talking with each other about a fundamental problem, which is how we can deploy across the whole enterprise when we need to make changes, and how we can do that quickly, because this is where organizations often break, and this is a solution to something that often breaks organizations. So we'll start with the problem definition. And the problem we're addressing is that a lot of companies have lower profits and revenues than they could because they're not able to make changes to multiple systems throughout their enterprise simultaneously. It's a very difficult process in most companies to make deployments to lots of different systems. And if you're really going to be customer focused, you have to be able to make deployments that span the entire enterprise. And the reason that's a problem is that there's often, and more specifically, there's very commonly unnecessary complexity and redundancy in the way that systems are organized and in the way that they're deployed. And that unnecessary complexity and redundancy is what's slowing down deployments and development of software. So this is about how to solve that problem. And we start at a really high level at the business level, where we design enterprise workflows. That's often something that's resisted in companies. And what we want to do is take a global view of the whole enterprise and start with the customer and show how we can have changes propagate across all of the systems in the company in order to serve that customer better. And in order to design those enterprise workflows and implement them, we've got to simplify the systems that are underneath the enterprise level. So this will show us how we can model the components of the business in a way that promotes reusability of the components. And it'll show us a way to simplify deployments. And it can show us a way to reduce the amount of engineering work that's overall required. And we've developed and released a free tool that makes solving this problem really, really easy. And I can show you what that is in some detail. But we're starting at the really high level of workflows. We need to design enterprise workflows. If we're going to make changes across a company, we're going to need to start with an understanding of the external customer who we're actually trying to serve, and how that external customer is going to relate to our organization. And the external customer has a life, and there are things going on in that customer's life, whether it's a business customer, it's a business organization with people as employees buying from your company, or whether it's an individual, there's other things going on in their life. And then there's their relationship with you, which is based on a series of processes that they go through. And our job as an organization is to make that customer process so much easier. And the customer process might have a number of steps, and each step might interact with a different aspect of our company that we can call a touch point. And the idea is that the touch points go back into how we're managing workflows. And we've got external customers on the left. There are also people in our companies that we call stakeholders, or we might call internal customers. And they also have steps and processes where they're interacting with the way we manage workflows. And each one of those steps for the stakeholders or the internal customers is going to hit up an internal touch point. So these touch points are what define our relationships. And the ability to have our enterprise systems serving the relationships we need to have with each of these types of internal and external customers is what we're talking about when we're focusing on enterprise level and enterprise level deployments, enterprise-wide deployments. So if we think about how we manage workflows, all of the apps in a company, we've got an IT organization, and an IT organization has however many people. Each of the people is working on something in one capacity or another that might be related to an app or a system or an environment in which the app or the system might be running. And we can organize all of those apps or systems into different categories at an enterprise level. And one category might be marketing, another might be sales. We might look around and see that there's a group of customer service systems. And there's a website, which might include some mobile apps. There's operations, which we might think about as the back end fulfillment of value. And that's different in every company, but it's the whole series of things that go together to deliver the value that the customer receives from the company. There might be finance systems and human resources systems. And all these systems have to talk with each other. So you might have an integration layer in between all these different groups of systems. And the point of this slide is to show that all these different types of systems are needing to serve customer relationships. And some of those customers are external customers, and some of those customers are the internal customers we might think of as stakeholders. And if we're looking at these relationships, they're all flowing through touch points. And the idea is that we need to make really fast upgrades throughout this whole chain of relationships if the organization's going to change quickly enough. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point in the process now that I've laid out this much?
I just have one comment, and that is, if you were to put the word "the" between block and chain, um, all I could see was blockchain for the first like minute and a half there. I was just thinking of blockchains. I'm like, how do you use blockchains? I don't know, just a suggestion or a thought. Blockchain means something totally well, and maybe that's spelled all one word. I'm not sure, but
No, you're right. That's great because it's not blockchain. It's these things you can either, if you don't, you're really getting to the heart of what this slide's trying to say. If you don't have
it
a,
blocks the
what's
chain
that?
of relationships. I'm sorry to overwrite or talk over. Yeah, I totally get it once I figured out that if I put the word "the" in there, it made total sense. So workflows enable or block the chain of relationships throughout the organization.
Exactly.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. If we're not realizing that we have to be the servants of workflows in order to serve our customers, then we're really missing out. So that's what this is starting with at the business level. Were there any other questions or comments before I keep moving?
I like the way you laid out the complexity of what you're trying to simplify and when it comes to change management.
Does this relate to things you work with tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when it comes to more internal tools that then data flows from them out into like HR and finance and those kinds of things. Yeah, definitely.
The next slide just builds from that, and we're taking this idea in the last slide and showing something that's very similar, which is that customer is trying to evaluate your organization and whether to buy things from the enterprise. And they've got some metric for doing that. And that metric or that way of measuring things goes into this concept that we're laying out before of these different touch points and these different types of systems. But what's new here is that if we're going to try to deploy a change, when we're trying to serve that customer, we might find that in order to get a better score on that customer's metric, or in order to satisfy the place the customer really needs to be satisfied, if the customer's got a pebble in their shoe and it's cutting them up every time they take a step, you might find that the way to get that pebble out of the shoe, if for the customer, is to adjust one particular step in their process. in a way that enables your organization to serve them better. And that means that the particular touch point that that step might interact with in your company might need to change. And in order to change that touch point, you might have to make changes to the web application or a mobile app. You might need to make changes in your operations systems. You might need to make some changes in your customer support systems. There might be some change in the sales process, because the sales process might need to make customers aware of particular changes, particular possibilities at different points in the process. The marketing process might also change, so some of those apps might need to change. And since they all need to talk with each other, the integration layer might need to change. And this is where we get to this idea of an enterprise-wide deployment. Just satisfying one small aspect of the customer's experience might involve reaching all the way back through the enterprise. And that also might hit up internal touch points of some stakeholder processes, because if you think about it, all of those sales employees or marketing employees or service employees or operations employees might need to interact slightly differently. So that's how their process changes as well. And as you've probably figured out by this point, each of these dashed red lines is showing a place in the enterprise where something might need to change. And if we're going to satisfy that one aspect that one customer's needs, we've got to be able to deploy to all these different places. And this is quite a bit on a slide. I tried to make it simpler by animating it. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this level? Because there's quite a bit on this slide. So then we've got this idea of what we were showing you earlier, of these different types of systems. And one of the things we do with this tool, the Agile Cloud Manager, is try to reduce the management of these systems to a point where they're so easy that each one of these buckets of systems might feel like it's an appliance. And if you think of an appliance, a toaster is an appliance, and a toaster is actually a very complex thing. A toaster has to be able to be plugged into the wall and receive electricity from the wall. It needs to convert that electricity into a form that can be used inside the toaster. It's got to have a heating element. It's got to have a temperature, a thermometer, or a timer, or some combination of the above, that are going to enable it to make sure that it's toasted enough, and that needs to be attached to a controller that can change the heat setting. And it needs to have some spring mechanism where you pull it down and then wait for it to pop up again. There are a lot of different working elements that would make a toaster difficult to design for most people, but everyone can use a toaster without having to think twice about it because it's so easy to use. And the idea is, how can we make each of these collections of systems in our enterprise as easy to use as an appliance, so that we can make deployments to change all these different pieces? And we do that by making some changes underneath these enterprise pipelines in order to make enterprise pipelines possible. This is your value stream management, a term for describing what we're talking about, the field we're talking about. And it's something that's not widely implemented, but it's widely held as an ambition in companies to be able to have deployments across the whole enterprise. And one example here is, if we look at these different collections of appliances, we just have the first stage in the pipeline might be deploy an upgrade of the integration appliance, and then to the next appliance, which might be operations, and the next might be your web or mobile appliance, and then your next might be a marketing appliance, and the next might be sales, and then maybe support, and then maybe finance, and then maybe HR, if all of these need to change. And this is just one example of what a pipeline is. If you're not a technical person, at a high level, this is just showing you that these large buckets of types of systems in the company can be grouped together and can be deployed as individual units. And depending on what the changes are that need to be made, you might have a deployment process that is just some subset of these. But the idea is, how can we make it this simple? And if we want to start with this idea of these pipelines, every one of these stages might result in a cloud appliance being created. So we're going through something similar here. to make it very simple so that when we get into how the tool works and how it relates to what you've already got, we're laying this out so that it's simple. All these toasters start showing up, all these appliances start showing up as we go through our pipeline. Question is, how do we get there? Because we're starting with what the company already has. And if you've worked in infrastructure or in DevOps, you know about infrastructure templates. If you're a Scrum Master, working in those fields, your engineers are producing infrastructure templates and curating them all the time. If you're in the application side, you might just think of those in terms of environments. An environment gets created and your app gets deployed into an environment. Well, that environment's defined by a template or a collection of templates. And you've got these already. But the idea is that what we want to do is start with what you've got and make them more reusable. And somehow, between what you've already got and the idea of this enterprise pipeline and these resulting appliances, we've got to connect all this to this free tool that you can download and use, the Agile Cloud Manager. And there are two main ways that happens. One is from whatever pipeline tool you're using already. You might be using, a Jenkins, you might be using Azure DevOps, you might be using Bamboo. There are all sorts of pipeline tools. You might be using GitLab. Regardless of what pipeline tool you're using, the pipeline can create these appliances by making calls to this command line interface, which if you're a more technical person, you call a CLI. And then your existing templates are able to be orchestrated using a very simple language. If you're an engineer, you might know what a domain-specific language is, but it's a very, very simple, very straightforward language that doesn't really require much more than a few hours to learn. Really, you get it right away. I could explain it in 20 minutes, and we've got a engineering workshop that goes into detail what the domain-specific language is. It's described on their website, the agilecloudinstitute.io website, very easily. But for our purposes, that defines what the appliances are as results of or aggregates, composites of the infrastructure templates you've already got. And I can move on from here, but we've covered a bit more territory, and we've gone from this high level enterprise needs to have these different systems across the whole company change and have changes then be deployed all at once in order to be able to satisfy a customer and improve profitability. We've moved from that to, if you're getting inside this pipeline, you've got two pieces that are connecting to a free app, and that's resulting in your existing templates being able to be managed as appliances. Does anyone have any comments or questions at this point, since we've laid out a lot more here?
I have a question. May I know what kind of value this Agile Cloud Manager is adding to the tools that are existing? You have mentioned the pipeline tools. I just want to understand. Could you please repeat that part?
Sure. What this does is this makes it easy. This is a higher level tool than the other templating tools. This is a tool, it's focused on how to model an appliance versus other tools. And I'm deliberately trying not to get too technical, but other tools like a Terraform is going to be a multi-cloud tool that's designed for deploying particular infrastructure, particular environments. And you're going to have a tool like CloudFormation is the AWS templating tool that's like Terraform. Or if you're in Azure, you might have ARM templates. And those different types of templates are lower level templates that are designed at the product level, at the app level. And what this does is it's a higher level that enables you to orchestrate those lower level tools so that you're able to look at your enterprise at an enterprise level and do things like enterprise-wide deployments, or do things like rotate your systems back and forth from one cloud provider to another.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think you kind of answered it, but if I could, my question was going to be, where does Terraform fit in this? And maybe it's I understood lower than this, but is your pre-existing infrastructure templates, would Terraform fit and CloudFormation fit there? And then your domain specific language talks to those and to the Agile Cloud Manager.
Exactly. And I'm deliberately not going into, I want to answer what we're doing is we're coming up with ways of communicating with different types of people. When I lay out something that shows what the domain specific language is, it's very clear, but it's also very engineering-ish.
Okay.
But what the appliance is, it's a collection of systems, and a collection of each system can be defined in a file that, and each one of these system templates or system files is going to be, it's going to have a foundation, and it's going to have a collection of different types of services in it. And each one of the services is going to have a collection of instances. And the Terraform might define the foundation, or the Terraform might define one of the instances of one of the service types, if that makes any sense.
I think so.
This is
Thank you.
how do you take all these? Think of a company that's got let's take a small company that might have 20 apps. Or a big company might have 1,000 of them. Each one of those might need to be deployed using CloudFormation templates or ARM templates or Terraform modules. And this would be a way to organize all of those in a way that is more of an enterprise level deployment. Does that make sense, Bernie?
Yes. And I think it's, it'll keep making more sense as we go, or I'll ask more questions, but yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're just staying at a really conceptual level, but yet we're getting all the concepts in there. And I'm gonna, here we go, I will tap on this. And here we go to this next one, where this lets you see what the CIO might see, or this is your every project in the whole PMO, the whole project management organization, laid out in one place, and how you can really simplify that. You've got platform engineering teams. There might be several of them. And each one of them is going to be working on different types of projects. And the different types of projects are each going to have repositories. And if we're trying to do enterprise-wide deployments, there are going to be pipeline projects where we're designing an enterprise pipeline. They're going to be appliance projects where we're going into particular appliances and we're developing just the integration layer, or we're creating just the web layer, the environment just for the website. There might be system template projects, which I'm deliberately not getting into in some depth because it's a layer inside the appliance. And then there might be building block projects that might be your existing templates, like your Terraform projects or your CloudFormation projects. And by doing it, laying it out this way, you're able to have governance for all of your platform as code. And at the same time, you've got application engineering groups, and the application engineers might be in a few different groups, and they each have application projects which are related to the repositories that store all the code for their applications. And this is where application governance is. So what this tool is enabling us to do is to make it easier to have governance of platform as code that just is not really possible in most companies, because it's just too far afield. Everything's so spread out and so complex. This is able to add a layer of simplicity that makes it easier to govern the platform as code. So that all of your Terraform and all of your CloudFormation, all your ARM templates, they can be reduced to how they relate to the value that the customer is receiving from the company. And these all go into pipelines, and we were looking at pipelines in earlier slides. And the pipelines are able to use this free tool, the Agile Cloud Manager, and it's basically something that's downloaded into we call them agents, but it's basically downloaded into the compute instances, the computer instances that the pipelines use to make all of the changes. And you've got your resulting platform, and then you've got your users. And the idea is, as these appliances are deployed, you're able to produce an integration appliance. You might produce your public and customer website or mobile app appliances. And so these users are able to be connected to the enterprise through the platform that's able to be produced more efficiently. And we might just go through each one of these different types of appliances. And the idea is to put the whole portfolio of projects in your project management organization in one place. And that's what this slide's trying to do. There's a lot on this slide, but if you're the director of the PMO, if you're the CIO, this is the kind of thing you can look at and see what this tool can accomplish at the enterprise level. Do people have any questions or comments about this?
Just one quick question. When you used, I think you said the term CIO,
Sure.
Charlie, India, Oscar, in my world, that's the chief information officer. So maybe there's another, does that stand for something else, or are you thinking chief information officer when you're talking about that?
I'm talking about the CIO, the CTO, the people who run the IT organization.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So someone who's responsible for all of the projects in the whole enterprise.
Thanks. I always was, it's probably just me thinking, not having a formal definition of CIO. I always thought they would be dealing with data more like a chief data officer, but not necessarily so technical. So CTO makes total sense to me. I can just substitute that for me. Thank you.
When you see these building block projects on the left, Bernie, and you see how it builds up from the building block projects on the left to a system template, which is just the Agile Cloud Manager, that's our domain specific language, and an appliance project, which again is just us. We're putting a wrapper around this building blocks. Does this kind of give more insight to the question you were asking about how this relates to Terraform and CloudFormation?
I think so. Yeah, it's building up to higher levels of abstraction, and it assembles the lower level things in a way that's manageable. I don't know if that's a fair way to say it, but that's kind of how I'm taking it away, or what I'm taking away so far.
Yeah, and the problem we've got, and we've got people from a couple different sources here. The Agile non-technical presentation I was giving 2-3 weeks ago was all about reusability. And this, then you and I were in another meetup where it was all about your, the domain specific language and that piece of it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is the idea is these building blocks, the whole idea is to reduce the redundancy. Because in most companies, every one of these platform engineering groups is going to be recreating the same things again and again. So if there's 10 platform engineering groups, they might have 10 different versions of every single thing in the company. And the idea here is to shrink that down so there's one version of everything in the company and not 10. And then maybe have a second version be an analogous copy of it for a different cloud provider.
Yeah, I completely see the value in that. And I've seen, like you said, the redundancy or the duplication of effort for most of my career, you know.
Does anyone have a question or comment before we move to the next slide? Well, if this is the whole picture, I'm just not the kind of person who goes in and says, this is what we're going to do right away. I'm an iterative, agile person. So the question is, this might be a vision, and then how do we get to the vision starting from where we are? And the start from where we are way of approaching things is to take one system, one part of the company, and this could be the system for producing the front end, the environment that produces that hosts all the front end apps, or this could be a system that's focused on storage, a particular type of storage, or a system that produces certain types of database implementations for the company. Regardless of what it is, you might start with one thing that hurts the most in the company, that's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of what's going to benefit from an easier, simplified way of orchestrating things. And with the first one, you develop a business case where you're looking at the present situation and then the future state. If you implement this for that system, you see a financial benefit, and you design an architecture for that initial approach. And that architecture is then approved, the business case is approved, and you build out the proof of concept. An engineer might do that in 6 weeks or something. We've got working demos on the website you can get running in an hour in your company, but taking it from it works right away now to taking one of your systems and adjusting one of your systems to implement this way. Maybe if you're a small company, you might do that in a week. If you're a big company, you've got all these rules and complexities, and it might take 6 weeks to build out a proof of concept. As big companies doing it well, and then you move from implementation. So your business case, might take some period of time to develop. Then the proof of concept phase. Then you implement this for one group, and what we've done is you've basically replaced the way that people are currently managing and deploying a particular system with this new way that's more efficient for one of those groups, if there are 10 groups doing it redundantly. And then after it's successfully implemented, you migrate it so that if there are 10 redundant implementations of the same thing, you create one implementation and you migrate it to all the different groups. And then you've got one project and not 10. And the one project can be done better. And even if you do it better for twice as much money, you still saved 80% of the money, because you're not doing 10 times, current X, you're doing 2 times current X and distributing it to 10 groups. So you saved 80%. And that you look at the first system and get that working. And from that, an appliance is built up as a collection of systems. 2 or 3 different systems might together go into what your appliance is. And you do the same thing where you create a business case of looking at the present state and then look at the future state. If you're going to have this whole thing be organized as an appliance, I showed you 8 different types of appliances in earlier slides. And you create an architectural diagram with key success factors that are going to have to be proven to have passed, so that there's a whole testing program that gets developed. And then that gets approved. And so that gets built out. And some number of weeks later, your proof of concept has been passed. It's been built. It's been passed all of its tests. Depending on your company, you might have weeks of testing that's turned the thing into an 8-10 week project. But at some point in time, it's done the automated testing, and then it's implemented. And then if we looked at 8 different types of categories of systems, that might be 8 different types of appliances. We might migrate to all of them. Where again is the business case, and then the proof of concept, and the implementation. And these are the building blocks for the enterprise pipeline. Because if you're thinking about that enterprise pipeline and everything's very complex and redundant, it becomes possible to have an enterprise pipeline if we're shrinking things down to a very simple level with these with the command line interface I showed you, and with the domain specific language I showed you, so that they're able to organize these systems more efficiently. And the enterprise pipeline goes through its process of the business case and the proof of concept and implementation. And so here we've started with one system, and we've shown how we're able to have program management for all the different things that were in the last slide, where you're the CTO, you're the person who's looking at, you're the head of the project management organization, the person who's looking at every project, at every product in the whole company. And now you're able to actually deploy that because you simplified everything, and that enables the company to evolve faster. And that's the program management version. That's the start where you are version of program management. And the last slide was the whole enterprise on one picture vision of the future version of it.